Hi. Gambling is predatory, and just hear me out for a moment. Corporations are using gambling as a way to target people and line their pockets with cash. Kids are getting targeted within video games, and all of this is done with no regard for the number of people rising that are calling gambling helplines. On top of all this, it's leading to higher suicide attempts, food insecurity, and so much more. So, you might think gambling is a fun activity, but it can do so much more harm than good. So let's first start off with the history of gambling. Gambling is nothing new. It actually traces all the way back to ancient civilizations, from Rome to China, all tracked by different writings and equipment within tombs. Many historians actually associate the first forms of gambling as forms of divination. Divination is the practice of seeking knowledge of the future or hidden truths through supernatural or mystical means. Humans sought knowledge or intentions of the gods, which is a very short step from actually betting on the outcome of throws or casting lots. However, in ancient times, casting lots wasn't considered gambling as it is in the modern sense, but instead it was connected with inevitable destiny or fate. Gambling has continued to be much more widespread than just the interpretation of gods and throwing dice and casting lots. In the 15th century, organized gambling and gambling sanctioned by governments through lotteries were utilized. And this continued very popular years later within the 13 colonies in the US. These lotteries were to help build their infrastructure, very similar to how we utilize them today for public works projects. In the 17th century, with the popularity of gambling houses, mathematicians began to take a serious interest in probability games, including dice and cards, stemming from the probability theory. And don't forget sports betting, because it wasn't just relevant how it is nowadays. It was relevant for hundreds of years. It wasn't just for you to bet on if a football player could keep playing even though he's got 42 concussions. The Romans probably did that too. Gambling was popular and generally accepted all the way into the 19th century, but due to the development and formalization of religious groups like Baptists and Methodists, they rejected it as sinful due to a zero-tolerance policy of gambling. The Protestant revival, or Second Great Awakening, essentially banned all forms of gambling. But, like history shows, making things illegal doesn't make it better. You know, and if Americans gotta have one thing, it's gambling. The illegalization of gambling in the United States actually just led to a bunch of underground gambling rings and casinos. Because Americans, we can't be stopped. We must gamble. By the end of the 19th century, the underground gambling world had expanded all across the US and was very widespread. There were huge amounts of cash to be made, and the public grew tired of religious puritanism. Add in the rapidly accelerating American economy, and it was the perfect conditions in order to have a new gambling wave. Despite its long history and popularity, no one could have predicted the sheer scale and accessibility of gambling in the 20th and 21st century, which highlighted the personal and social problem of pathological gambling. Pathological gambling is when individuals are unable to control their gambling. During the 1980s and 90s, pathological gambling was recognized as a cognitive disorder by medical authorities in several countries, affecting more than 1% of the population. And the problem has only gotten more prevalent. In 2018, the Supreme Court decided to judicially overturn the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act. In the case, Murphy v. National Collegiate Athletic Association. This law effectively outlawed sports betting nationwide, and with the court's overruling, it became widespread throughout many states. Since 2018, this has had a major effect on the American gambling scene, as sports bettors are now essentially able to bet on whatever they want, from flag football to the Super Bowl. Also, in the past year, 57% of Americans have participated in some form of gambling. And that's just the adults. We'll get into how kids are being involved in this as well later. With the law being overturned in 2018, many states now allow people to online gamble, bringing us into the modern era of gambling. Years ago, Americans used to have to go into a casino to place a bet, play their slot machine, burn their eyes out, or at least go down to the racetracks, bet on a horse or a greyhound, or contact a bookie. But now, not only is it accessible, you're being told to bet almost daily, no matter where you look, and it's almost impossible to escape. Hundreds of ads all over my social media, billboards, people succeeding at gambling, online gambling, Twitch. But some of those creators aren't even using their actual money, and these ads are backed by million-dollar companies, all preying on the average American to spend more for them. Currently, sports betting is legal in 39 states, including Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. This can include online, in-person, or a combination of both. It varies by state. But some states are refusing to have it be legal and are trying to have it banned. Why is this? Is it because it's bad? Is it because it hurts people and people are getting injured and dying? Well, no, it's not that. I decided to focus on 2 states that still have sports betting illegal, California and Texas, largely because they are considered the biggest holdouts on this decision. First, California. In the past few years, California voters have had the ability to vote on several measures to legalize sports betting, and yet they keep failing. Experts say that this is primarily due to the Native American tribes in California that are considered powerful in the gambling scene. Currently, Native American tribes have exclusive rights to gaming inside of California, and yet sports gambling will likely be legalized in California soon. Bayard Fogel, a San Francisco attorney who specializes in this area, pointed out, as California is the 5th largest economy in the world, the potential tax revenue they are losing out on from not legalizing sports betting makes this a very crucial issue, as it's about $500 million per year that they've lost in tax revenue not having it legalized. And keep in mind, that's just right now. The sports betting industry is getting larger and larger every single year. Therefore, it's likely just a matter of time before the state folds. So what about Texas? Is it also about their Native American tribes? Well, no. It actually goes back to what we talked about earlier. Religious beliefs. Gambling remains largely illegal in Texas due to long-standing political and cultural opposition based in conservative and faith-based values, and a constitution with a high threshold for changes. The state's resistance is nothing new. Since 1903, this has been enshrined within the Texas state constitution. The constitutional amendment essentially bans gambling from poker to online betting. Although there are a few exceptions that exist, a state lottery, which seems like a common theme here, as well as bingo for charity, parimutuel betting on horse or greyhound races, as well as a few tribal casinos which operate under federal protections. But even these are very limited in scope and scale. The penalty for gambling in Texas is a Class C misdemeanor, making it one of the most restrictive states in the United States. But despite Texas and California making sports betting illegal, the people need to gamble. They can't stop gambling, they have to do something. Well, they're looking for solutions. Finding an offshore bookie traveling to gamble, they need to find a fix. And a new solution has arisen. Kalshi. Kalshi is an American financial exchange and prediction market based in New York City. Kalshi, allowing you to trade contracts, works similarly to the stock market as it is structured as a financial trading platform. This is where users trade peer-to-peer on an open book rather than betting against the house. And Kalshi is in fact legal in all 50 states, which is highly publicized all over social media through their millions of dollars worth of ads.
Look, if you're already calling the MVP, you might as well test it out on Kalshi. They've got simple yes-no markets on real outcomes, totally legal nationwide and regulated. If you swear you know the season storyline, download Kalshi and make your call.
So you might ask, how is it legal? Kalshi operates as a federally regulated prediction exchange under the CFTC and is not under state gambling laws. This federal oversight allows Kalshi to offer event contracts classified as derivatives and not traditional sports wagers. And Kalshi goes way beyond just a supplement for sports gambling. It allows bets on who will be the next president, what's the best AI of 2025, which answering what is the best AI in 2025 has $12 million in cash collateral on it already. And this bet is technically determined by another site altogether, LM Arena, which is a site that allows people to rank AIs based off their own experience. And honestly, it doesn't have that many votes alone. So one relatively popular tweet and you're able to skew the market fully in your favor. Even scarier than a few people gaming the system in order to make some money is trading contracts like this. What will Powell say during his December press conference? Who will Trump meet with this year? And I hope you already realize how scary this is, but if you don't, this is terrifying. Because if a politician gets their hands on this and is able to make bets, they can change their decisions based off of how the market is going and if they want to bet on specific decisions that they're going to make. As of more recent news, there's actually a partnership with Kalshi and both CNN and CNBC. Meaning soon these networks will be displaying odds that are at times life and death, with trades like which vaccines will RFK end recommendations for this year, which point blank is terrifying. And there have even been reports of people betting on starvation rates of Palestinians, but I couldn't find official results of this. Kalshi has continued to rise to popularity, with the New York Times reporting that Kalshi rose to $50 billion in annualized trading, marking more than a 1,000-fold increase from the $300 million in annualized trading volume from last year. But it has not been full smooth sailing for Kalshi. California's tribal gaming organizations have filed lawsuits against Kalshi for infringing upon their gaming rights, specifically in regards to their sports betting. But in a recent ruling, a judge actually sided with Kalshi, citing that it's regulated by the CFTC and does not infringe upon their gaming rights, denying the tribe's request for an injunction. But despite this win for Kalshi, there's still been a lot of backlash of how the company is getting around gambling laws, with several other states and organizations choosing to start lawsuits. And the CEO has started to respond to this, essentially stating, there's no house to bet against, so it's not gambling.
I'm concerned that people might say, wait a second, you're getting around the regulators.
Look, I mean, it is not a secret that financial markets pretty consistently throughout history, and you might know this, Jim, there's always this tension. People call it gambling, or people are speculating what's going on here. But there's a few things that are important here. So we're regulated by the federal government because we're a neutral, transparent financial market. We're like the New York Stock Exchange right here. People are trading against each other. So it's Jim against your friend or your friend against Jim. There is no house.
Right.
And that's very critical. In traditional gambling model, there's a house. And the house always wins. On Kalshi, there's no house. Anybody can win.
So you might be asking yourself, why is this bad? Why do you care, Alyssa? It is bad. That's why I care. Gambling disorder, previously called pathological gambling, was considered an impulse control disorder until 2013 when the DSM-5 classified it as an addictive disorder. Gambling stimulates the brain's reward system, similar to drugs or alcohol, which ultimately means it also can lead to addiction. If someone has a problem with compulsive gambling, they may continuously spend money going into debt and hiding their behavior. According to recent research done by the American Psychological Association, people in their early 20s are the fastest growing group of gamblers, and many kids are starting even younger than that. Nearly 2/3 of adolescents aged 12 to 18 had participated in gambling or gambling-like games in the past year, according to a 2018 Canadian study of over 38,000 youth. According to Mark Potenza, who researched gambling addictions, discusses adults who have a problem with gambling range from 0.4 to 2%, depending on the study and the country. And rates rise for people with specific conditions. About 4% of people who are being treated for substance abuse also have a gambling problem, and about 7% of people with Parkinson's disease have a gambling problem as well. And on top of this, an estimated 96% of people who have a gambling issue also have another psychiatric disorder. Due to increased accessibility and promotion, it seems that the problems with gambling have only risen over the last few years. Currently, the National Institute of Health has no efforts aimed at problem gambling, and there are no specific restrictions aimed at gambling advertisements besides the general FTC regulations. This means oftentimes kids are seeing their heroes promoting gambling. You know how many times I've seen very popular creators in very problematic sports betting app ads? A lot. And for kids, there's very limited resources if an issue does occur with gambling problems. But we see the issue continues to rise. According to the Ohio Casino Control Commission, after Ohio legalized sports betting, the number of daily calls went from 20 to 48 for their gambling helpline. Other states have reported something very similar, and on a national trend, since the law changed in 2018, nationally, there's been a rise in calls to the National Gambling Hotline, shown in this graph. Also, in this graph, you might notice the sudden drop in data from September to October in 2025. This is because the phone number is being taken away from the National Council on Problem Gambling. Here is their statement on that ruling. The National Council on Problem Gambling, NCPG, is dismayed with the court's ruling, which orders NCPG to cease management and the use of 1-800-GAMBLER as the National Problem Gambling Helpline number after September 29, 2025. This decision will fundamentally hinder nationwide access to timely, confidential, and high-quality care for those in need for the problem gambling support by taking critical services offline. Moreover, it will degrade public trust for the one-to-one. Another way children have been targeted for gambling addictions is loot boxes, which typically players buy for a small amount of money. These are digital containers or prize containers within games. They might include a new character, weapon, something to help you in the game, or something completely useless.
I remember I spent so much. I had like zero in my bank account. I had to like borrow money from like my boyfriend then to like eat.
Loot boxes are a financial risk with an unknown reward, making them, in a sense, a gateway to large-scale gambling. Belgian policymakers have categorized them as forms of gambling, and those policymakers were not the only ones. Other places that have passed regulations on these loot boxes are Australia, Netherlands, and Hawaii. Based on research found in loot boxes and problem gambling investigating the gateway hypothesis, loot boxes tap into the same psychological principles that draw people to slot machines. They may deliver a bigger payoff, but payoffs come at random intervals. In one survey of 1,102 adults in the United Kingdom, about 20% of gamblers said that their first introduction to gambling was loot boxes, and their experience within the game made them think that other forms of gambling would be fun, according to a 2022 study. On top of this, according to research by the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health by adolescents, about 40% of people have played simulated gambling games, and teens who have played these games are at higher risk for developing gambling problems later in life. Among other emerging insights, people who have gambling addictions also have smaller volumes in their amygdala and hippocampus, two regions that help with emotional learning and stress regulation, which makes statistics like about 14% of sports bettors have had thoughts of suicide and 10% have tried to make an attempt on their life. These statistics now make a little more sense with that in mind. And the bad news doesn't stop there. Number one, 5.5% of women and 11.9% of men will experience some harm from gambling in their lifetime. Number two, a Swedish study found that those with a gambling disorder are 15 times more likely to commit suicide than the general population. Number three, in Victoria, Australia, 4.2% of suicides were found to be gambling related. And number four, for every person who gambles, around 6 other people will be affected and harmed by their actions. And yet, industry analysis say that global gambling revenue will reach $700 billion by 2028. Thus, the reach of gambling goes even further. And that $700 billion doesn't even include apps like Kalshi, which are essentially trading apps, but let's be honest, they're betting. Those who are most at risk for a gambling addiction are those suffering from large life changes like separation, death of a loved one, injury, as well as social stressors like poverty and discrimination. So, good thing everything's going so great in the US, right? Don't got anything to worry about. Unfortunately wrong. Political tensions are higher than ever, with social media, as well as people losing their jobs and financial stability every single day, making gambling such a risk for so many people. Gambling is a problem, but countries are going to be having a hard time doing restrictions, as governments receive substantial tax revenue from sports betting, online gambling, and more, which creates sort of a dependence for governments and disincentives to reduce harm, as these big gambling whales who spend lots of money make the government more money. Through commercialization with big influencers and large partnerships like Kalshi and CNN, we can see the lack of care for the public, and we start to feel it normalized to risk our money in order for that small cash grab. It takes time for a gambling problem to develop, and there's ways to stop the progression. This can range from setting a limit before you go in on how much you're going to spend if you go into a casino or if you're going to bet online, or setting an alarm to remind yourself how long you've been gambling. Education is also important, especially for kids. Parents should talk to their kids about loot boxes and gambling-like games to make sure they know the risks and are aware of what their kids are participating in. Also, here are some other ways to help prevent gambling addictions. I thought I would just include here, including talking to your representatives and trying to get some of these things passed, as it's so important for people to be protected. Overall, gambling is dangerous, and in my view, it's predatory and harmful. And I'm in no way saying it should be illegal, as we all know that's not going to work. Overall, we just need more protections in order to prevent children from going down a bad path. Currently, the most effective way to currently help someone with a gambling addiction is cognitive behavioral therapy. If you or someone you know is struggling with a gambling addiction, I'll include some resources below, but always seek help. I'll also include all the resources from the research I did in this video. Well, I hope you learned something today, and bye.
Gambling disorder has one of the highest rates of suicidal thinking, suicide attempts than any other addictive behavior.